Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing something kind of ambitious, which is creating my own sketchbook. I was inspired to do this by an artist YouTuber I watch. At this point, she has probably made a few sketchbooks of her own already, and I'll be following a tutorial from Bittermelon Bindery, who I started watching once I became interested in creating my own book. In this video, I'll be stating some steps I do along the way, and right now I'm just getting all the things I need for some important steps in the process. The paper I'm using is mixed media paper since I want to paint on it. It's 250 GSM, so it's quite heavy, which is just right for me. It's a glue-bound book, so after detaching the pages, there was glue on the edges, but I got rid of some of it while trimming the pages later on. I've started folding the paper to create the pages, and I'll be using a bone folder to press down the seams. A bone folder is a very important tool, and I use it throughout the entire process. Using the tutorial, I created a guide to help me determine the length I wanted the pages to be and the number of holes I needed to create for sewing the book block. I wanted to speed up the process, so I tried cutting multiple sheets at once, using my book press as a guide to keep the pages in place. But when I was done, the edges were very rough and I still had to trim them down, so I decided it was best to cut the pages one at a time instead. I also think maybe getting a non-slip craft ruler would have been better because this moves around. This ruler I'm using moves around too much. It's time to punch holes into the pages using the guide I made on an awl. I did this with one page at first, then decided to do it with 2 pages each time. Sometimes I had to come back with the awl and punch the holes again because it didn't always go all the way through the page. I'm guessing with heavier paper you have to use much more force for hole punching. After checking to see if the holes are aligned, it's time to sew the pages together and create a book block. I'm measuring out my thread and threading a needle to begin sewing. I'm following the tutorial to create a French link stitch for my book block, which is a type of stitch for bookbinding. At the beginning, I think I was doing the stitches wrong, but I think it got better as I kept going. The thread got tangled a few times, so I had knots in some areas of the thread, but fortunately the paper didn't rip as I was pulling the thread through, even though the knots were quite big. The book block is done, and if you look closely, you might see the stitches at the first 3 pages is different from the rest. I'm still not sure if it's correct, but this is the best I could do. I'm using a book press to push and press the pages together so I can glue the spine. I'll be using tacky glue from my local art store throughout this entire project. I try to use enough glue so the spine is really strengthened. Running the awl between the wood and the paper helps the book block detach easily. Once the spine is dry, I'm taking it out of my book press and it's time to measure and attach the end papers. I'll be using sugar paper, which is about 100 GSM. I wanted colored paper, so this is the best I could find. But in the tutorial, she did say that heavier paper would be better as end papers for beginners. These are waste sheets that I would be using to apply glue so it doesn't get everywhere. Here I made a mistake when applying the paper because it was not aligned with the rest of the book block. So I had to take it off and try again. I was hesitant to do this because the glue had already dried, so I had to be extra gentle and I didn't want to risk ripping the paper since it's so delicate. But I did it anyway and I managed to fix the alignment and keep the paper from ripping. It's time to prepare the spine linings, which is the cheesecloth, headband and end band, and the ribbon. I used the tutorial to make my own headband and end band by folding fabric over thread, though I probably should have used something thicker like wool or twine. The ribbon goes first, then the headband and end band, then the cheesecloth. I made sure to use enough glue so they are attached properly and the spine has good reinforcement. The book block is now complete and it's time to make the hardcover case. The book I decided to make is a letter length book and not A4 length. I didn't realize that since I bought A4 grey board, the measurement of the letter book would be slightly longer than A4, so I decided to cut about 1 cm extra grey board to extend the length of the case. Also, the boards are 945 GSM, but they were a bit bendy, so I decided to double them and glue 2 boards together for the case, but only use 1 board for the spine so it's more flexible. I'm using a spacer I made using the tutorial and paper tape to test the fit of the case on the book and to see the hinge gap spaces as well. Since I'm satisfied with the fit, it's time to glue the fabric to the boards. You're actually supposed to use book cloth, but I couldn't find any that I liked or fit the book theme I was going for, and I didn't want to buy supplies to make my own. So for now, regular fabric will suffice. I used the spacer to make sure the boards were the right distance from each other. And I used a bone folder to smooth the fabric on the outside, and since the fabric is lightweight, the glue made it kind of wet and sticky, but after it dried it went back to normal. After finishing the front, I trimmed down the edges and glued them on the inside of the covers. Now it's time for the second to last step, which is to case in the book block, that is attaching the hardcovers to the book using the end papers. We're back. I've watched a lot of bookbinding videos at this point, and I never realized how difficult this step would be. When I did the first half of the end paper, it took me 10 tries to get it aligned properly. The end paper was either sticking to the spine or completely slanted, and the glue even kept drying, so I had to keep applying it again. But the second half was easier, and I got that on my first try. I think it helped that the book block wasn't moving around like the first time. I also had to put paper on top before smoothing it down because the sugar paper was peeling a bit. The book is complete and is now ready to rest. Put watercolor paper at the front and back to prevent glue from sticking to the pages. I'm going to press my book using my book press and leave it to rest overnight. After 5 days of work, the moment has come to reveal the finished book. For my first time, I'm really happy with the book results. I tried making a book with a couple of pieces of paper and a stapler before, but this is a good attempt at a higher quality level. There are some mistakes that happened, like the spine of the book is a bit loose because I think when I was gluing the boards, it might not have hit the spacer exactly, or maybe a 1 cm hinge gap is too much for this book. Also, I noticed that some pages in the book it's quite messy in the middle. You can see holes and the cheesecloth through it. This might be because when I was gluing the spine, the glue went in between some pages, so it was either too much glue or the pages weren't really aligned properly. And cutting the ribbon was a mistake because I don't have a lighter to seal the edge, which is what you're supposed to use to seal the edge. Though I do use glue to seal it off camera. My entire theme of this book was based off this purple ribbon color, so it's kind of sad that I didn't just use the whole thing. Also, you can trim your pages, the edges of the pages of the book, if you want to make them even, but I didn't want to risk cutting my book too small or making the edges too rough. Overall, for a beginner and a first time bookbinder, I think this is a good first book and a good leap into bookbinding. The process was actually not as complicated as I thought it would be, and it was fun to do, and it was satisfying to watch the book come together with each step. I will definitely be creating more books in the future. If you were thinking about creating your own book, I think you should try it. It's a great learning experience. I recommend using the tutorial from Bitter Melon Bindery that I used because it's very detailed and she explains the entire process step by step. But you could search for a different tutorial depending on the type of book you want to make. Thank you so much for watching this video to the end. I hope it was entertaining and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye!